You know you should let go. People tell you this constantly. Let go of the worry. Let go of the need to control everything. Let go of the outcome, the plan, the grip you keep on every part of your life. And you want to. You've tried. But there's something underneath the grip that won't release. A deep, wordless conviction that if you stop holding on, if you loosen your control even slightly, everything will fall apart. That your vigilance is the only thing keeping the chaos at bay. That to let go is not peace, but danger. And so you keep holding on, keep controlling, keep bracing against a catastrophe that never quite comes, but never quite feels far away either. This is exhausting in a way that's hard to describe to someone who doesn't live inside it. The constant management, the inability to rest, because resting means loosening your grip. The way your mind keeps working even when there's nothing to do, scanning for threats, planning for contingencies, trying to secure a future that refuses to be secured. You are tired. Not from doing too much, necessarily, but from the ceaseless effort of trying to hold everything in place, of trying to make an uncertain life certain through the sheer force of your own control. Alan Watts understood exactly why you can't let go, and his answer is more surprising and more liberating than the usual advice. The reason you can't let go is not that you're weak or anxious or broken. It's that you've misunderstood the very nature of what you're trying to do. You are trying to make yourself secure in a universe that is fundamentally, irreducibly insecure. And the harder you try, the more insecure you feel. The grip itself is the problem. And once you understand why, letting go stops being a thing you have to force and becomes something that finally makes sense. Alan Watts was a philosopher and writer who became one of the great interpreters of Eastern thought for the Western world. He had a rare gift, the ability to take the most profound insights of Buddhism, Taoism, and Hindu philosophy and translate them into language that spoke directly to the anxieties of modern life. And among all the subjects he explored, few were as central to his work as the problem this video is about: the human craving for security and the suffering it produces. In 1951, Watts wrote a book that gets to the very heart of it, with a title that names the paradox directly: The Wisdom of Insecurity. In it, he made an argument that overturns almost everything our culture assumes about how to live well. We spend our lives, Watts observed, in pursuit of security. We try to make ourselves safe, financially, emotionally, physically. We try to secure our future, protect ourselves from loss, guarantee that things will turn out the way we need them to. We treat security as the goal, the thing that will finally allow us to relax and be at peace. And Watts argued that this entire project is not only doomed, but is itself the source of the very anxiety it's meant to cure. His central insight was stated with startling simplicity. The desire for security and the feeling of insecurity, he wrote, are the same thing. They are not two separate things, one of which cures the other. They are a single phenomenon viewed from two sides. To desire security is to feel insecure. The craving and the anxiety arise together and cannot be separated, which means that the harder you pursue security, the more insecure you will feel, because the pursuit itself is the insecurity in action. You cannot grasp your way to peace, because the grasping is the opposite of peace. Watts used a simple image to make this clear. To hold your breath, he pointed out, is to lose your breath. The person who tries to hold on to air by clutching it in their lungs doesn't secure their breathing. They suffocate. Breath is only kept by letting it go, by allowing the natural rhythm of release and return. And life, Watts argued, is exactly like this. The attempt to hold on to it, to grasp it, to secure it against all change and loss, does not preserve it. It strangles it. The very thing you do to feel safe is the thing that guarantees you never will. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. To understand why you can't let go, you have to confront something that the controlling mind desperately resists. The fact that the security you're reaching for does not exist and never has. What was uncompromising about this? The desire to be secure, to make life certain and safe and permanent, is a desire for something that is fundamentally impossible in the kind of universe we actually inhabit. Life, Watts observed, is change. It is movement, impermanence, flux. Nothing stays, nothing can be held in place. Everything is in the process of becoming something else, including you, including everyone you love, including every arrangement of circumstances you try to lock into place. This is not a flaw in life that could be corrected with enough effort. It is the nature of life itself. To be alive is to be in motion, to be uncertain, to be perpetually meeting a future that has not yet been determined and cannot be controlled. Security, in the sense of a fixed and guaranteed permanence, is simply not available in a universe made of change. This means that the entire project of making yourself secure is a project of trying to stop the river from flowing, to freeze the flame, to make the impermanent permanent. And it cannot be done. No amount of control, planning, worry, or vigilance can turn an inherently uncertain life into a certain one. You can spend your entire existence trying, and you will fail, not because you didn't try hard enough, but because the thing you're trying to do is impossible in principle. The universe does not offer the kind of security you're seeking, to anyone, ever. And here is where the suffering comes in. Because you are trying to achieve something impossible, your efforts can never succeed, which means the anxiety never resolves. You control and still feel unsafe. You plan and still feel the future looming, uncertain. You grip harder, and the sense of insecurity, far from diminishing, only grows. Because with every increase in your grasping, you increase your resistance to the fundamental nature of reality, and that resistance is precisely what anxiety is. You are at war with the basic condition of existence, and it is a war you cannot win, fought on a battlefield that exists only in your own resistance to what is. Watts saw that this is the trap the controlling person is caught in. They believe that if they could just secure things a little more, control a little more, plan a little more thoroughly, they would finally feel safe and be able to relax. But the safety they're chasing recedes as they pursue it, because the pursuit itself is the anxiety. They are trying to solve the problem of insecurity with more of the very activity that creates the feeling of insecurity in the first place. And so they can never let go, because letting go feels like surrendering the only thing that might one day make them safe, when in fact letting go is the only thing that ever could. Watts went deeper still, to the root of why the grip feels so impossible to release. And here he touched on his most profound and most challenging insight, one drawn from the heart of Eastern philosophy. The reason you cling so desperately to control, he suggested, is bound up with an illusion about who and what you are. We experience ourselves, Watts observed, as a separate self, an ego, an I, that stands somehow apart from the rest of life, looking out at a world of experiences and events that happen to it. This separate self feels itself to be the controller, the manager, the one who must handle life, defend itself against a threatening world, and secure its own survival against everything outside it. And it is this sense of being a separate, isolated self fundamentally divided from the rest of existence, that generates the desperate need for control. Because if you are a small, separate thing in a vast and uncertain universe that is not you, then of course you must control it. Your very survival seems to depend on managing a reality that is other than yourself and potentially against you. But Watts, following the deepest currents of Eastern thought, argued that this separate self is an illusion. The feeling of being an isolated ego, cut off from the rest of life and set against it, does not correspond to reality. In truth, you are not separate from the universe. You are an expression of it, a movement of it, as much a part of the whole as a wave is part of the ocean. The boundary you feel between yourself and everything else, the sense of being a lonely controller facing a hostile world, is a kind of hallucination, a misperception of your actual nature. You are not a thing in the universe. You are something the universe is doing. And this changes everything about the problem of control. Because if the separate self who needs to control everything is itself an illusion, then the entire project of that self, the grasping, the defending, the endless attempt to secure itself against a threatening world, is built on a misunderstanding. The controller you take yourself to be, the anxious manager trying to hold everything together, is not your true nature. It is a construction, a false sense of separateness, and the suffering it generates is the suffering of maintaining an illusion against the reality of your actual connectedness to all of life. This is why, Watts suggested, the grip feels like survival. The ego experiences letting go as a kind of death because the ego is sustained by the very activity of controlling and defending. To stop grasping feels like ceasing to exist because the separate self is, in a sense, made of grasping. But what dies when you let go is not you. It is only the illusion of the separate, isolated self. And what remains, what is revealed when that illusion loosens, is your actual nature. Not a lonely fragment desperately defending itself against the universe, but a living expression of the universe itself, no more needing to control life than a wave needs to control the ocean it rises from. Watts was often skeptical of turning his insights into techniques, because the very idea of a method for letting go can become another form of grasping, trying to control your way into not controlling. But his work points toward a genuine shift in orientation, one that makes letting go possible not as another effort, but as a release of effort. The first movement is to understand deeply that the grip is not working. This is not a technique, but a recognition, and it is the necessary foundation for everything else. As long as you believe, somewhere underneath, that more control will eventually deliver the security you seek, you will never let go, because letting go will feel like abandoning your only hope of safety. The shift begins when you truly see what Watts was pointing at, that the control has never actually made you safe, that the security you're chasing does not exist, that the grip itself is generating the very anxiety it's meant to relieve. When you genuinely understand that holding on is not working and cannot work, the grip begins to loosen on its own, not through force, but through the simple clarity of seeing that it was never accomplishing what you thought. The second movement is to accept insecurity rather than fight it, to stop resisting the fundamental uncertainty of life and instead allow it. This is the wisdom in Watts's title, that the acceptance of insecurity is itself a kind of security, the only kind actually available. When you stop demanding that life be certain, that the future be guaranteed, that everything be under your control, an extraordinary thing happens. The anxiety, which was generated by your resistance to uncertainty, begins to dissolve, because there is nothing left to resist. You are no longer at war with the nature of reality. You have accepted that life is uncertain, and in that acceptance, the uncertainty stops being a threat and becomes simply the texture of a living, moving, open existence. Watts pointed out that this is where real peace is found, not in achieving the impossible security, but in making peace with its absence. The third movement is to return to the present moment, which is the only place life actually is. Watts observed that the anxious, controlling mind lives almost entirely in the future, in the anticipated threats, the imagined catastrophes, the outcomes it's trying to secure. But the future does not exist. It is a mental abstraction. The only thing that ever actually exists is this present moment. And in the present moment, right now, you are almost always fundamentally all right. The suffering of insecurity is the suffering of a mind projecting itself into an unreal future and trying to control it. When you return your attention to the present, to what is actually here, now, rather than what might happen later, you step out of the entire machinery of anxious control, because there is nothing to control in the present. There is only what is, and it can simply be experienced rather than managed. Watts made a striking observation about this that is worth sitting with. He pointed out that when we say we live for the future, we never actually arrive at it, because when the future comes, it comes as the present. And if we have trained ourselves to live in anticipation, we will not know how to inhabit the present when it finally arrives. We will simply project ourselves forward again into the next future and the next, forever chasing a moment of arrival that never comes. The person who cannot let go of control is, in this sense, a person who has never actually arrived in their own life, always bracing for what's next, always managing a moment that hasn't come, never simply here. And the tragedy is that here is the only place life was ever available. The whole of your existence has taken place in a series of present moments, and the anxious grip on the future has meant missing nearly all of them. To return to the present is to finally show up for the life you have actually been living all along. The fourth movement, the deepest, is to sense your connection to the whole rather than your separation from it. This is harder to do deliberately, but Watts believed it was the real resolution. To the degree that you can feel, even for a moment, that you are not a separate self, desperately defending itself against a hostile universe, but an expression of the same living reality that moves in everything. To that degree, the need for control simply falls away. The wave does not need to control the ocean. The leaf does not need to secure the tree. When you sense your belonging to the whole of life rather than your isolation from it, the desperate grip relaxes naturally, because the fear that drove it, the fear of a small, separate self facing annihilation in an alien world, is revealed as the illusion it always was. You were never separate. You were never alone against it all. And so you were never, in truth, required to hold everything together by yourself. The real reason you can't let go is that you've been trying to secure yourself in a universe that offers no security, as a separate self that was never really separate, through a grip that generates the very fear it's meant to relieve. You cannot let go by force, because the force is more grasping. You can only let go by understanding, by seeing so clearly that the grip is futile that it finally releases on its own. This is why Watts spoke of the wisdom of insecurity, not the achievement of security, which is impossible, but the wisdom of accepting insecurity, which is the only peace a human being can actually find. To hold your breath is to lose it. To clutch at life is to strangle it. To try to make yourself perfectly secure is to guarantee that you will feel perpetually unsafe, because the clutching is the anxiety, and no amount of it will ever produce the peace you're reaching for. The peace was never on the far side of enough control. It was always on the other side of letting go, available the moment you stop demanding that life be other than it is, the moment you accept the uncertainty you cannot escape, the moment you remember that you are not a lonely fragment holding back the chaos, but a living expression of the whole moving reality that needs no holding at all. You do not have to keep bracing against a catastrophe that your vigilance was never actually preventing. You do not have to hold the universe together through the force of your own control. It was holding itself together long before you arrived, and it will continue long after, and you are not separate from that vast, self-sustaining movement, but a part of it, carried by it, expressed through it. The grip you've been maintaining was never the thing keeping you safe. It was only the thing keeping you afraid. Let go. Then, not as another task to accomplish, another thing to control, but as a release of the impossible effort you were never required to make. The security you were chasing does not exist, and you do not need it. What exists is this moment, this breath, this living reality of which you are already and always a part. And in the acceptance of its beautiful, unavoidable uncertainty is the only peace there has ever been, the peace that was waiting, the whole time, on the other side of the grip you were so afraid to loosen.